This limited Kintsugi Heroes podcast series was made possible through grant funding provided by the New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice Connecting Seniors Grant Program. If you'd like to find out more about Kintsugi Heroes, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au. Welcome to our Kintsugi Heroes special series, Connecting Seniors, where we share the experiences of aging Australians to create connections across our communities. In this episode, John Millam had a chat with Bill Kable, a practicing lawyer and passionate advocate for fathers' rights, bringing his rich background as a fifth-generation descendant of Henry Kable, an early Australian. Bill has navigated the complexities of parenthood, family law, and community involvement, offering invaluable insights into the challenges and triumphs of connecting seniors and supporting families. Now, let's get to the conversation.
So, ladies and gentlemen and listeners, welcome back to Kintsugi Heroes, Stories That Matter. And today we're working on our Connecting Seniors series. We have a very special person to talk to today, a man who is not unfamiliar with being in a interview and being on in a broadcast situation. Bill Kable, welcome to Kintsugi Heroes, Bill.
Well, thank you very much, John. And look, I've been an admirer of Kintsugi Heroes for a long time, and it's great to be able to join you.
Well, it's so great to have you on today, mate, because I'm hoping today, before we get into, say, your story a bit of background about who Bill Kable is, I'm hoping to work with someone who is vastly experienced at this process we're engaging in today, which is sharing and telling stories and eliciting stories, right? So hopefully we can get to talk a bit about that, and you may be able to give me a few pointers, right? So welcome today, Bill. And for the listeners, right, I would say probably the significant thing is that you are a key part of the development of Dads on the Air, and that's a massive network of broadcasting to fathers and men and families, I guess, too. We don't restrict who listens to it. So we have to talk about how that works and how your input and how you got there. But let's start back at a little bit of background on Bill Kable, right? Rather than me talk about who you are, can I ask you to tell the listeners who Bill Kable is?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm still a practicing lawyer. I still feel funny when you talk about seniors, but
yeah. So I put myself in that category, and it's so strange, right?
But I can't deny I've been practicing as a lawyer for this is my 50th year, as it happens. I'm at a personal level. There are a few interesting things. I'm a fifth generation descendant of Henry Kable, and Henry was on the First Fleet, and he finished up having the first marriage in Australia.
Wow!
And the first lawsuit in Australia.
And so that's it. That's epigenetic being in law.
Well, some people say we're still on the same line of work, being a convict and a lawyer, but he also had the first pub in Australia, so he had, very important in the establishment of Australia. And I as a child, I seemed to be. I feel sometimes like a bit like Forrest Gump, that I was there at some sort of pretty important moments. I was at the first the Beatles' first concert in Australia in 1964.
Wow!
And I went to the first State of Origin game in 1980, and then over the time, running's always been important. So I've run 5 marathons. A long time ago, I was married in France, so I've got an abiding interest in France. And at the family level, I always find this quite interesting, but many years ago when I was a student, I decided I'd been a blood donor since 1969, and I think I'm up to about 127 donations. But at one stage, there was a sign there asking about sperm donation, and so I got a bit interested in that. And I went and made some donations and didn't think any more about it for years and years and years. And then about 5 years ago, I got contacted out of the blue And it turned out that this was from my son, who'd come from this sperm donation. And it turned out, I got chatting with him, and I was going away. So I said, look, I'll give you a call when I get back. And when I called back, we were talking, and he said, look, there's something else I better tell you. And I thought, what's, he said, I've got a sister and you're her father too. So
Oh,
I suddenly found I had 2 new children, and now I've got 3 new grandchildren.
oh,
And my son and I get on really well, but the daughter, I guess you'd expect this. She's never wanted to sort of acknowledge how she was conceived, so I've never had a chance to meet with her. But yeah, that's a pretty amazing thing.
that is extraordinary. Can I ask you, it's one thing to get a call from an estranged family member. It's another to get a call from an estranged family member you didn't know existed.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
Well, my jaw hit the floor because the first comment was, he put in his note, you don't know me. I don't know quite how to put this, but you're my father. Jaw drop. Then he went on and said, look, I don't want to put any claim on you.
Hmm.
I'm quite independent. I've got in a good relationship, and but I just sort of wanted to thank you for my existence. And yeah, and so it's all strange. And then sometime after that, we went out to dinner, and he invited his mother. So I met the mother of my child for the first time, when he was like 30 years old. So that was unusual.
Was that an IVF program?
Yeah, it was. It was
Yeah.
the Royal Hospital for Women, and I think you got paid for expenses to get there to do it. So I think it was about $20 each time I went, something like that. But it was it was your past sort of coming back and tapping on the shoulder.
My goodness.
I just never expected there was anything like that out there.
It's kind of a unique situation. Can you tell me, like, did you notice a connection? Because clearly you wouldn't have had any nurture in that connection.
No.
Did you notice a nature connection?
I'd like to say so, even just in appearance. But like some people say, he's got a Kable head. But I don't. I'm not really sure. I can't say that. I mean, of course, I've got 2 children through marriage, and really they're very different from this child. So it's I can't really point to anything like that. I mean, I think of like TV shows, where you see families and nothing looks strange, even though of course none of them are related. And I think it's I don't know, maybe family resemblances. Sometimes you see them, sometimes you don't. And I don't particularly see it with him. My daughter, I've only seen photos of her, but there might be something there. It's hard to tell.
What about emotionally? Did you connect with with this young man?
Well, because I'd never met him before, like the first time we arranged to go out for dinner, and he brought his partner, and I brought mine, and I just thought he was an exceptionally nice bloke. I was so proud of him, really. But I it's hard to say. I mean, there was some sort of linking, but I didn't really feel a great. I'm sure he's the same. There wasn't a great sort of feeling of communion or anything like that.
So, and really, like I'm there shouldn't necessarily be one, right? It's just, I'm just, interested at the opportunity to review that. So what a lovely idea. Just on a personal basis, I found, I met a half sister I didn't know I had recently. And it was such a joy to welcome someone new into my circle, right? Just that the old one was getting a bit stale, I think, right? So it was nice to refresh it. But was that something you felt like it was like another unexpected gift, or was it a burden?
Well, it certainly wasn't a burden. I always enjoy seeing him, but it's he's built his own life, and he's I'd have to say, I mean, I would have welcomed him into our family gatherings if he wanted to, but he hasn't actually done that. He's met he's met me. We've met a lot of times, quite a few times, and he's met my children.
Mm.
And of course, there are a lot of tricky elements here. Like I had to tell my children about this.
Yeah.
There is actually law in New South Wales to say that a child conceived this way cannot make a claim on your estate. So, they needn't have worried about, say,
Yeah.
losing the money under the will or anything like that. But and then I had to tell, my sisters. So there were a lot of, there are a lot of those sort of issues that suddenly come up. But I'm told by the Department of Health, I registered with the Department of Health. I didn't tell them that I'd already met the children, so they think I don't know anything except that there are 2 children. And but anyway, they assured me there are no more, so that was a relief too.
Yeah. And surprises are best when they're limited to.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. And of course, the idea, like, when you get to a certain age, right? For me, it's the discussion maybe turns to a little bit of legacy, right? So, when you originally donated, what was your thinking, and how has that changed now related to legacy?
They told me when I made the donation, there were a few things that they told me that I thought were interesting. One was that the professor said to me, "You might worry about unconscious incest if one of these children happened to meet one of your married children later in life."
Yeah.
But he said, "Look, you needn't worry about that." And he said, "In any case, we believe that 1 in 4 children, that the husband is not the father." That was a bit of a shock.
Wow.
So that's what he told me. And they also said, "Look, you'll never hear from these children again." And it really amazed me that 30 odd years later that the hospital, that somehow the Department of Health still did have these records, even though they hadn't contacted me. But there is now an opportunity in New South Wales where you can, if you can go on a register, and if both the father and the child are willing, they can arrange a meeting. But it has to be, both parties have to consent. So
it's getting complicated legally as well, I guess. So.
Yeah. And the mother didn't know much about me. She knew I was a lawyer. I think she knew I had blonde hair, but really there was very little screening done. I think I might have answered a quick questionnaire like, do you have any hereditary diseases? But there was no examination or anything like that. So she I guess took it on trust, and the things these women have to go through. I think she had 17 visits before she finally got pregnant. And but then, it worked so well, she went back and said, "I want the same father again." So she got had the second child.
That's and I love the drive, the maternal drive in that case, right? IVF obviously is huge these days. So
Yeah.
So pioneering times.
Yeah.
But of course that leads to the question, you were telling us about your family and your natural kids, the kids born in marriage, right? But that wasn't, that was a complicated process as well.
Oh, yes. Well, yes. Well, I mean, I guess that's how I got involved with Dads on the Air, because I found the family court, even though there was never any accusation made against me of anything, like, no one ever accused me of being a drunk or a gambler or a womanizer or anything else. But they still wouldn't let me see my children. I was only limited to, the most I ever got was 4 days in 14. And with all that, and I fought in the family court for 7 years trying to see those kids until I finally gave up. It was getting, my youngest child was coming up to 12, and the family court loses interest in children when you're about 12 or 13. So I thought, well, I may as well just give it away. So I didn't see them then for 10 years after that. But that was an amazing thing that happened. I was, just minding my own business, and the phone went, and I picked up the phone, and it was my son. And I hadn't spoken to him for all these years, and he just said, "I'm coming to Sydney. Would you like to, catch up?" Well, I jumped at that, and then my daughter followed not long after. So, we managed to restore the relationship. I think there's always going to be that gap, that 10 years gap in the relationship.
It's such an important time for young kids. It's when,
Yeah.
14, 13, that's when dads become very crucial to that process of, moving into adulthood.
Yeah, and the mother was very much an alienator, so she turned those children against me. I had some dreadful scenes with those children. She encouraged my daughter to run away from home, which was absolutely. I think that was when I decided I've got to give this away, because it was just too frightening to go into a room in the morning and she was gone. I didn't know where she was. And my son used to scream and swear at me and carry on. So yeah, it was very rough, and I just carried on through, and I tried through the courts to get be able to see the children, but the courts have really got no idea what they're doing. So the family court, I mean, and even now, I mean, the trouble with the family court, you're not supposed to identify any people that have been in the court. So, they're very well protected from any criticism. But anyway, that's where Dads on the Air really started. It was a group of fathers who in 2000, the year 2000, one of them was a journalist called John Stapleton. And he got together with a group of other disgruntled fathers, and they started this radio program. That was in August 2000. And John came up with the name Dads on the Air, and that was run from a community radio station in Liverpool. And then they were going to conferences and things, and I met them at one of these conferences, and they invited me to come into the studio. So I did that in September 2009. And we were all just sitting around, and I was, taking it all in. I'd never been in a radio studio before, I don't think. And then they said something or other, and they said, "Now, Bill, you're a lawyer. What do you think?" They threw the microphone at me. So that was my introduction
to broadcasting.
Yeah. And then, so from then, September 2009 in the community station, then that went through till about December 2014 when I started at putting the show out from Fine Music FM in St Leonard's. And that goes to the Community Radio Network. So that's a 10-year anniversary of going to the Community Radio Network, which is
fantastic. And of course, it reaches a vast number of people really through that network and being broadcast. So how many dads, engage with this kind of material?
Well, yeah, look, I'd like to think it goes out to a lot. I know community radio itself, they do surveys and they do have a broad listenership. So we get it out through the Community Radio Network. They've got some 307 stations around Australia.
Yeah.
It also goes, it's podcast on virtually on all the major podcast engines, and it goes on our website. So there are some overseas people I know that listen in. But beyond that, sometimes people ask, how many listeners have you got? Well, I can't really answer that, because the only way to do that is to run a survey, and I'm not about to run a survey. So, I don't know how many, but it's since I took it over with at Fine Music with the Community Radio Network in 2009, and I guess it's expanded from its early days of just dads complaining for an hour and a half to talking to all sorts of other interesting people.
Yeah, and it's such an incredibly necessary, if sort of unrecognized service, right? So I spend a little time helping with the organization Dads in Distress, Parents Beyond Breakup, group of dads in need, going through separation and without support, just got together and created a national organization. I find that really interesting as a lawyer, and you mentioned 50 years of law, right? Bumping into a court that doesn't work. How did that feel? Like there's a contrast between your faith in your profession and then seeing an example of it where it's a very difficult situation.
Well, family law, I think, really struggles to even be law like other areas of the law. I mean, I was a corporate lawyer for most of my career, and you come to expect certain things in the way things are done. But the family court is completely different. I mean, it's like an ivory tower, because in the old days, the judges used to go from court to court, and one of the courts they went to was a family court. So they had some experience of real life. Now they're in the family court all the time. So all they hear is these complaints from the parents. And I mean, it's not unusual to spend half an hour in court with barristers, solicitors, independent children's lawyer, independent children lawyers, a lawyer.
Yeah.
And they're all arguing about whether the father should pick the child up at 9:15 or 9:30.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing that goes on. And it's a dreadful institution to have to go to. And I felt when the court, I was picked on a few times in court because I happened to be a lawyer. Like it certainly didn't give you any assistance in court. That that was a strange thing, but it meant I had a barrister, and I briefed the barrister directly, and he was a human being, which was great, because these people get very officious, but he actually felt for it. Yeah, it's an extraordinary thing, and like I couldn't get over the fact that if the court made an order and the mother breached it, which she invariably did, there was no action taken.
No action. Yeah.
The only action available was if the father enforced it, and that was a whole other battle.
Yeah.
And I did do it once. I went to court on 3 serious breaches, and at the end of that, there was not even a tap on the wrist. It was when you think the court had available powers, including sending it to jail, there was no way in the world they were going to do anything. So, that was a bit soul destroying to go through that whole difficult exercise, and at the end of it, nothing happened. So it's it's a really bad area of the law, and a bad court.
It's interesting because you are in a unique position. You've got lived experience of that process. You have lived, you are a lawyer. And of course, now with Dads in the Air, you've spent time talking to knowledgeable people, or people who have had experiences in the court itself. So what do you now, what would you do if they gave you the ticket to change things?
Well, look, when the current family court was set up, goes back to 1975, when Lionel Murphy was the Attorney General.
That well-known cuddly figure, Lionel Murphy, right?
That's the one.
Yeah.
Well, he said, I mean, he had bad experiences with the family law, and probably why he saw it as a priority to fix it. And he set it up on the understanding that it would be run mostly by social workers. And, there were little things like judges weren't supposed to wear wigs, and there was not to be a high bench where the judge would look down at the parties. He was supposed to be on the same level as the parties. And it was all geared at, finding a solution. But unfortunately, as these things tend to happen, the lawyers got involved, and very quickly it suddenly became a lawyer-run institution instead of a social worker institution. Yeah, look, given if I had my choices, yes, I would go back to the original intention, which was to have it run more as social workers. I mean, it's such a mixture of things, because in the family court, like in every other area of the law, there's what they call precedent. So if a similar situation has arisen, you refer to what the court did on the previous occasion.
Yeah.
But the family court doesn't see itself bound by that. They say, oh no, every case is different, so we'll decide for ourselves. So it means that you can't really give much guidance, because the courts can do what it wants. And so I would definitely go back to having the lawyers less influence, and the social workers more influence. And I do mediation, so I would also promote mediation, so that you don't even have to go to court.
Yeah.
and people would, I mean, because you've always got the two big problems are the children and the property, and none of the reforms to the family law have made them any easier. That the father is always starting with a handicap, because there are all sorts of funny ideas about attachment and mothers, and I mean, the extreme example, I suppose, is Japan, where they make it that only one parent can raise the child. So it means Australian fathers with Japanese children and a Japanese mother, they've got no chance of ever seeing the children.
Wow.
The court will not give them a hearing. So, and that's the extreme. That, I think there just has to be more social work, more mediation, and take these judges. I mean, some of my experiences with judges and the family court, you can sort of look back on it now, but extraordinary. I mean, they're in another world. Like I wanted to see the children on Father's Day one year, and the mother had moved them up to Taree, and he said, well, you can see them, but only for 2 hours. Why? I don't know. So it would mean 3-hour drive up there, 2 hours with the kid doing who knows what, and then 3 hours back again, and then go to work the next day. And I mean, they're unrealistic.
Yeah. So, and it's not getting any easier. So, we can cross our fingers. I love the thoughts about that, improving things.
Yeah, I feel I've got to hand it over to. I mean, I've been a campaign for a long time, but I feel that hopefully there's a new generation coming up now which will take on the fight to do something about it. But it's just there's just been no progress for so many years, and they keep going backwards. So I don't know. I think I sometimes feel in 100 years' time we'll look back and think, what on earth were they thinking?
Yeah,
that's about it.
And of course, at the heart of this, in some ways, is some thinking, some philosophy around the impact and role of dads. And dads in the air, you must speak to and over the years, sort of interacted with a huge range of Australian dads. What do you think dads do really well in Australia?
In Australia, well, I think dads are getting more involved. I mean, I don't know what your family background is, but in my case, my father was an old school. He saw his role as to work hard and pay the bills, and not really get so involved with the. He had 5 children.
Wow.
So that was pretty much left to my mother, I think, most of it. Whereas nowadays, the thing I notice most, is that the fathers are getting much more involved with their children. They'll often take them to school, preschool. They'll, they take them to the activities. They cook. They do all sorts of things that maybe, in my father's generation just wouldn't have been an option. And that makes it, of course, harder for, because of the, if anything goes wrong in the marriage, that they'll be, the mother suddenly becomes the gatekeeper, and the mother will decide how much time the father gets to spend with the child or children. So, and I think Australian men are part of that change in fatherhood. Perhaps it's happening around the world. I'm not sure, but I think that's all good. I think the fathers, it's very important for fathers to have a role with the children in lots of different ways. I mean, you think about the relationship. I've done programs on the relationship between fathers and daughters, and fathers and sons, and one thing that screams out at you is how important it is for, say, young girls to get a role model of having a father. They know much better how to relate in their own relationships. So, there are those things which we should be. I think we need to encourage fathers to be more involved. Perhaps we're going the other way because there are so many more single mothers these days.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was just listening to some stats. During the COVID period, over 200,000 Australian marriages broke up. So it's becoming, vital that we work out how to do, co-parenting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, hasn't that changed, in 100 years? Like, there weren't divorces. And even when I was growing up, it was very unusual to have divorces. But now, if the kids go to school, they don't feel, that's what I suppose one good thing, that they're not on their own. They won't go in the class.
Normalized.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
So what do you think Australian dads can improve?
Be careful who you marry, I suppose, is the first the first thing. I mean,
I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry.
oh, I thought you were going to be the expert there, but no. I mean, all these problems wouldn't arise, I guess, if you have the happy marriage, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, people are still rushing out to get married. Maybe there are more people living together now than there were, and maybe they're more inclined to stay living together rather than actually go through the marriage process. But then they changed the law as far as properties they changed the law so that even if you're not married, if you've been in a relationship for 12 months, there's not much difference. So I think young men, I mean, because another thing which we haven't mentioned yet is the dreaded child support. And that when my wife told me the marriage was over, I mean, the first thing was, this is my life has suddenly just changed completely. And then you get the knock on the door with the child support saying, and by the way, not only is the family court going to take something like 60 to 70% of your assets, but you're also going to have to come up with after tax dollars to pay the wife. And they also operate in a bureaucratic netherworld. I mean, they don't seem to. They're almost impossible to deal with. In fact, when I was there, you'd get to deal with someone, and they'd sort of start to understand what was going on. Then all of a sudden, they'd change the person, so you'd have a new person to deal with. And I believe now you can't even do that. You can't deal with with child support at all. They won't. They don't allow any sort of meetings. So. My experience with the child support was diabolical. I think the last dealing I had with them was they worked out that because I had a self-managed super fund, so I was, that was my money going into the super fund, and there's a law that says you have to take a minimum amount out of your super fund each year, which I wasn't, which was my own money. It wasn't money coming from somebody else. But the family child support agency said, no, that's income, and we're going to not only are we going to take it, we're going to backdate it. So you owe us $10,000. And by that stage, I'd already taken them to court a few times. They had some extraordinary rulings against me, and I'd won those couple of times I went to court with them. But that time I was exhausted, so I just thought, look, I'll just pay the $10,000 and have these people out of my life.
Yeah,
and that was my last dealing. They never wrote to me and said, it's all over, thanks very much. No, I just didn't hear from them.
Yeah.
Oh, they're terrible, and leading to lots of men suiciding.
And that of course is something that those of us who support men understand, that this is a massive part of the landscape for blokes. So people seem to be asking the question, why is this so prevalent, or why is this an issue? What do you think we need to tell them?
Well, look, the only good thing about the child support agency payments is that, if you've got a spendthrift wife, or, if it might be costing you a fortune, at least with the child support agency, there's a formula, and you can sort of know, all right, well, from now on, I'm going to be paying this much.
Right.
But you've got to stay on top of it. And because, they do weird things, like, in how they work out your income, they'll work it out in the way that suits them. I mean, they don't necessarily have to go with your tax return. They can make their own determinations. So I think you need to look, that's all you have to do. You just have to do your best and try and work out fair. And don't, when you're sort of not allowed to see your children, you're not looking to pay extra money to the mothers. I think you just pay what child support agency says is the amount you have to pay, and pay that. Because if you pay more, that's the other thing. If you pay more, the child support agency will say, "Oh, well, you can pay more, so therefore we'll set it at this higher level." So you've got to be careful like that as well. But
and you were saying, the loss of men as a result of these, child support agent, family court actions, separation, the challenges that this adds to, other challenges like career adjustment and so on. So losing men, what are we going to tell people who are saying, we're losing too many men? What do we do about it?
Well, that was actually a campaign at Dad's on the Air in the early days that they had on the boss of child support agency and tried to pin him down on how many men commit suicide because of child support agency, and they would never admit it. Dad's on the Air took an estimate. We thought it was a man a day was killing himself because of the agency, but they never own up to it. They would have the figures, but they won't own up to it. So it's it's dealing with those are the most important things in your life. Your children and your income and your assets. Well, they're all gone. So it's a huge problem. I think most fathers want to do the right thing by their children. They're not trying to avoid their responsibilities, but it's just, it goes back to Bob Hawke saying, no child in Australia will ever live in poverty or something along those lines. Well,
by 1990 it was.
But he wasn't thinking that the government was going to do anything. He was thinking we're going to attack these fathers and get money out of them. So, it started off on the wrong foot, and I don't know. I think it's probably worse now than it ever was. But it's strange because you've got the family court has got this this clamp down on saying what's happening, but you don't hear too much about fathers getting caught up in child support agency. You hear a lot about the deadbeat dads. It's a dreadful expression. But you never hear about the fathers trying to do the right thing that get caught up in it.
And the vast majority of fathers do. That's the stats if they reveal them. So I'm interested. You mentioned earlier as a solution, one of the wisdoms you now have is to the suggestion that we find a different type of woman or marry a different woman. Is there a lack of skill, or is there an area for men to develop so that relationships are improved? Right, because I have a sense that it's harder to find the perfect woman than it is to work diligently together. Right, there's a lot of blokes I've worked in in business that would I didn't get on with, but we managed to get focus on the outcomes. So do you think men can embrace, from your experience, what kind of things do you think men can do to improve their ability to operate?
To have children is really, anyone can have children. If you can have sex, you can have children. So there are no restrictions there. And there are no real restrictions on getting married. In the church in years gone by, they used to have to pronounce the banns of marriage and put it up in the church, and you're going to get married. Has anyone got an objection? All those sorts of things. Whereas now, you just go down to the local registry and you're away. I don't know. Perhaps we made it easy to get out of marriages. Maybe we should also make it a bit harder to get into them. Anything like this would be resisted, I'm sure, in the community. But, for the long-term good of society, so that people are not losing their life savings and their children, maybe there should be something like I'm reluctant to talk about courses, but maybe there should be a cooling off period or something.
So certificate 3 in being a husband.
Yeah. Well, yes, I suppose, but and look, that would probably be a good thing. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people go into marriage and they've got no idea really what's involved,
Yep.
or even going into long-term relationships. Again, like after 12 months, it's much the same anyway as being married. So yeah, like one thing I would like to do is have more education for young men
Mm.
who might be inclined to have unprotected sex, they might occasionally think that a venereal disease, but that's largely controlled by antibiotics. But they don't think that they might be stuck with 18 years of child support and taking a percentage of their income.
Mm.
That maybe that might cool their ardor a little bit, or make them a bit more take more interest in stopping having those children, because that's I mean, that would really change your life if you suddenly found you had to support a child for 18 years.
So, and of course, Dads in the Air has expanded over the years to cover a lot of subjects that are relevant and in the discussion with men, and to masculinity. There's a lot of talk recently of of both the good and the bad side of masculinity and the patriarchy. So what do you think is in terms of you watching and even driving the conversation, where do you think we're going with the world of men?
Yeah, well, look, just speaking a bit more generally for a minute, Kintsugi heroes, you have people who really are heroes in the community. I think some of them been through the bushfires, and some have been through personal dramas, and and these people really are heroes. I guess my my community involvement is mainly, I guess, Dads on the Air, and but this is very unusual for me to be actually talking, because I usually like to stay in the
You're doing a
background.
great job, Bill. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I usually like to stay in the background and hear what my guests have got to say. I'm sure that's much more interesting than than my spouting my opinion week after week. So it is a bit unusual, but I have, over the years I have expanded it from those areas that we've been talking about with family court and fathers and difficulties with children. And although that's still the focus. I mean, in the introduction of the program, we talk about that the program is about fatherhood, family and parenting, men's and boys issues, and more.
Mm.
So that's still going to always be the focus. And in fact, I did an interview yesterday with Dr. Billy Garvey, who is a developmental pediatrician. That was about that. He's written a book called 10 Things I Wish You Knew About Your Child's Mental Health.
Wow.
So that was very interesting, talking about things parents should be aware of with their children. And probably all of us have been through 3-year-old tantrums and 2-year-old tantrums, 3-year-old tantrums, and then the different sorts of problems you have as teenagers, and all those areas where a little guidance would be very helpful.
Yeah.
And so he's put out this book because he says, to come and actually see me, you'd have months and months waiting to see a pediatrician. Although that's the focus. Yeah, I've expanded it, and a number of different categories now. We talk about parents. I feel very privileged that I've been able to speak to some extraordinary parents. Like, for instance, recently I spoke to Chrissy Foster, who most people would probably remember with her battles with the Catholic Church, and how a priest was abusing her 2 daughters, and dreadful situation. One of the daughters committed suicide, and the other daughter was catastrophic injuries in a car accident. So she was, and then her husband died. So what an extraordinary woman. Her book is called Still Standing. Well, she is still standing, and and she is inspirational with what she does, that she's still a fighter. She's fighting for, for children. And then, I've interviewed Ralph and Kathy Kelly, and again, people might remember they had a boy who was doing really, really well, and he was about 17 or 18, and he went up to King's Cross with his new girlfriend and got king hit and died, just like that. How they came to terms with that. And then it got worse because their other son, about a year later, committed suicide. So, these people have this extraordinary strength. And then, and also, like in the parenting area, I spoke to a fellow called Brendan Watkins, who wrote a book called Tell No One. And his story was unusual in that he found out that his mother had been a nun, and then subsequently found out that his father had been a priest.
Yeah.
And that was, and the father, he didn't manage to trace his father before his father died, but his mother is still alive, and he's met with his mother. But he battled the Catholic Church and had an enormous battle, trying to find out, what the story was about his parents. So, things like that are, well, they can be certainly for me, they can be very inspirational. Just hearing the things that parents will do, for their children.
And amazing. I love those stories. And of course, I believe also that it's, the quiet battles that, that men are engaged in every day just to grab more time or spend more time or support their family.
That's right.
Yeah, I love that. So, do you find yourself inspired by the stories you're inviting into your world? And is that the purpose of what your purpose now? You spent so much energy and so much time promoting those stories and sharing those stories. Is that your purpose?
Well, look, I guess so. I guess if I've got a purpose, I mean, I see myself as very privileged that I get the opportunity to talk to all these people, and they're willing to spend 27 minutes and 50 seconds, which is my allotted slot, discussing something. Whereas, I think a lot of, say, TV grabs and radio grabs might be, 30 seconds or 2 minutes or something. And you can't get your message across in that time. But, 27 minutes and 50 seconds, I think that these people actually, the authors and other people that I speak to, they appreciate the opportunity to expand a bit on it. And I think it goes back to where we started talking. One benefit of getting old is that, you have all these experiences to draw on. I with nearly everybody that I interview, and I've done something like 247 interviews for community radio. This is for the community radio network. The experience of being able to to draw on what I've been through, and I feel like I've certainly been through the fatherhood thing and even the sperm donor thing and the and I was at the Beatles concert, so I'm interviewing the authors of a new book about the Beatles.
You've been a piece of history.
So I think it helps if you've got a bit of background. Like if I was 20 years old, I might find it more difficult to draw on that experience, even though as I say, I don't like to be in the front of the interview, but still to be able to prod people in a certain direction, I think it helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm interested in, you mentioned 20 years old and the young people you mentioned earlier, right? How do you now see them? Right, the Generation Z are copping a bit of flack at the moment. It seems to be a bit tit for tat for us boomers and them. But what's your view of young Australians at the moment?
Oh well, look, I'm very impressed. I mean, I've got 2 children, and my daughter's 27, my son's 31, and I'm very impressed with them. I think we're still at the stage. There's some talk in America at the moment that maybe it's going backwards, but I think we're still at the stage where our children can expect to earn more money and do more things than perhaps we did. So So I think, you know, I mean, they have the opportunity to travel much more than we did when we were growing up. So they have all these things, and I think, you know, I think they're, I think that younger generation is going really well. I mean, there's the perennial complaint about music. You know, I don't particularly like rap and some of the stuff, the music that's out there now. But apart from their choice in music, yeah, I think they're. Oh, my son's you know, he plays in a rock band. Is it,
Right.
you know, the real headbanging music?
Right. Yeah.
Which I, you know, I can appreciate when he's playing, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't be my first choice. So
Yeah.
yeah, so look, I think there's cause for optimism with the next generation coming through, and
Mm.
you know, I think we're learning more. Like, you know, this doctor that I interviewed yesterday, I think, you know, we're learning more about you know, how we should react when, you know, when children, like just simple things like language. And he was saying, well, rather than saying, you know, if a child's having a difficult moment, saying, oh, it's all right, it's better to say, I'm here, and
Mm.
be supportive.
Mm.
That's what they're really looking for.
Yeah.
So, you know, little things and big things, I think I like to think we're progressing.
Yeah, I would agree. I have three kids, and 30, 27, and 23, and they're incredibly clever. But not just that, I like extraordinarily, cleverer than I was. But not just that, I love their heart. They have a heart, right? I see a lot of potential in the future because of the way they care. Yeah, they've got a lot of challenges ahead of them, but many of them are our fault. But I do love how they have the potential is extraordinary. So
Yeah, and the interest in community
mm,
activities, I think that's really really great. If, you know, if we can encourage them more. I do wonder what's going. I mean, you know, this is completely off topic,
mm,
but I wonder what's happening in America. You know, where you've got two men approaching 90. You know, it's
it's amazing, isn't it?
uh,
Yeah.
I don't know what's happened over there, but in Australia, we seem to bumble along. I don't think our leaders have ever been world class either. But anyway, apart from a few that
Yeah.
have been, but a lot of them are very very ordinary.
Well, yeah. Well, at least on Sunday we can go to the beach, right? That's like I think Australia's saving grace might be.
Yeah,
Yeah, we couldn't have a revolution because the cricket's on the weekend. So,
that's right.
but yeah, which is interesting. Touching on a point, both with young people. One of the roles I see as a senior, right, as a dad or a man with that senior status, sometimes in recent years that men moving past 50 have it's seen to be devaluing. Did you feel like you're as you got to a certain level of seniority that the attitude towards you changed? Have you felt that?
Um, Look, probably not, because I probably haven't come to terms that I've reached that level of seniority.
That's probably the best defense. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't look. I don't think so. I think, you know, I think we have lots of opportunities, which you know, as long as we're still healthy,
Yeah.
yeah, we can do stuff now that perhaps, you know, before, if you're just working all the time, you didn't have that opportunity. So yeah, look, in many ways, it's getting better, I think. Sounds like a Beatles song.
Well, I agree. Do you have any thoughts about how somebody sort of transitioning into that senior section of their life, how they can maximize that? If it's getting better, how do you embrace that?
Well, you know, I suppose, you know, just following on from a minute ago, I mean, I think, you know, health has obviously got to be the number one thing. So, you know, really, and I think the younger people are moving away from things like smoking, which is, you know, they've got to get away from that. They've got to, you know, just the regular stuff, you know, getting a bit of exercise.
Yeah.
Don't eat sugary food all the time. I think if you do that, and keep your mind active. I mean, you know, I've said a few times that I see myself as very fortunate that I get to talk to you know, some of the world leaders in different areas that you know, that sort of keeps you on your toes.
Yeah.
I, I've had, I like to think, I've had a couple of terrorists in my studio, for instance, Peter Grester, who's, he's a convicted terrorist, and he can't go to places like Egypt.
Wow.
He's a nice bloke that came to the studio, and Sean Turnell, who was in Burma, and he was locked up for 2 years. So yeah, I mean, so if you have the opportunity to meet people, maybe that would be a good thing to do. I mean, as I say, I'm lucky to go through this radio station, but there are lots of other ways you can meet just interesting people and keep on your toes, I suppose.
Yeah, connection is massive, isn't it?
Connection, yeah.
Yeah. I love that idea too. Terrorists, that'd be awesome. But that, because they're benign terrorists, they're terrorists for good.
Yes,
Yeah. We should clarify perhaps. But I love the idea of using, the wisdom, our journeys to a certain stage of life can be given back. Right. And I know that's part of what you do every day. For young people, the idea of accessing the wisdom of elders, right? Once upon a time we sat around the fire and directed, and had people, come to us and ask questions. Do you see a role for senior Australians back into the lives of young people and in a mentoring sense, maybe?
Yeah, look, definitely. There are a couple of ABC programs about older people and then different ages.
Yeah. The teenagers one was just the last one. Yeah, that was amazing.
And look, I think we've got to encourage that. I mean, I interviewed a woman called Anne-Marie Slaughter, who was an assistant to Hillary Clinton.
Wow.
And she is very big on the way that society is going. We are going to need a lot more carers, and so much so that all of us have to get involved with caring. Most of us have had elderly parents that we've had to look after, and so I think she encouraged it, and I think she's right. I think the big movement has got to be towards more caring and perhaps getting younger people involved in caring.
So AI might free them up from, doing lawyer type jobs and into caring type jobs.
Absolutely. Lawyers are one of the most threatened people, I think, with AI. So yeah, get them doing something else more useful, maybe caring.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, maybe a good place to sort of, sort of round up is, how you think things are going to change in the future, right? So we're coping with massive areas of technology change, but also social change, as we talked about America and so on. What do you see the future being, mate?
Well, look, you try and be optimistic, and we've talked about a few optimistic things, but there are some enormous threats. You've talked about AI. Well, that could be a new industrial revolution, and if they link up quantum computers with AI, who knows where it's going to lead. I mean, already, if you look, we have people are becoming like the $6 million man. We have artificial eyes, artificial legs, artificial hearing. All if we keep going that way, we'll be all artificial. But
I'm quite looking forward to it. Actually, a bit of an upgrade would be nice.
well, as long as it's still you in there.
Yeah.
But then, look, I've been reading a book recently about, it's called Nuclear War. And talk about frightening. It makes everything we do, you wonder about everything we do because, around the world, there are thousands of these nuclear bombs that are much like 1,000 times bigger than Hiroshima, that are on hair triggers. And it just needs, and it's not, people tend to think, the president of America's got to approve it. Well, not necessarily. It's unfortunately very similar to Dr. Strangelove, which was written by a guy who was expert in British security. And it's that really does concern me that one mistake and that guy in Korea could, for no apparent reason, if he sent one of his ICBMs towards America would automatically respond, and then Russia would respond, and then China would respond, and how, if you look at the big picture, how likely is it that humanity is going to be around for another 1,000 years? I wonder about that. But in the short term, yes, I think we've got lots of cause to be optimistic.
Okay, despite the overall massive looming threat of nuclear war, we're good.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I think there are lots of green shoots and lots of things that that we can be excited about, and I guess you need to encourage people to get more involved in everything.
Yeah, I love that. Do you think, like, I see a lot of older Australians, maybe the stereotype grumpy old men, right? If we, as maybe our task is as older Australians to focus on the green shoots and promote them.
Yeah, look, I think so, and as we were talking a few minutes ago about where young people can get more involved with older people. They've got to be prepared for a few rejections. I imagine some older people might be a bit cranky and
Right.
don't want to have young people talking to them, telling them what to do or whatever. So, but yeah, I think if we persist and if we promote caring, I think that's definitely the way to go.
Fabulous. Well, that is a beautiful image to finish on. Thank you so much, Bill, for an incredibly diverse and interesting conversation today. Thank you for joining Kintsugi Heroes and for offering us your story and your wisdom. Much
Well,
appreciated.
thank you, John. And look, I have all the time in the world for Kintsugi Heroes. I think it's a wonderful organisation, and your founder, what a ball of energy he is. So,
Yeah.
Ian Westmore, and I've interviewed with Ian several times on Dad's on the Air as well. But he is an inspiration for me, and and Kintsugi Heroes is a fabulous exercise. So, congratulations.
Well, thank you very much on behalf of Kintsugi Heroes. And thank you, Bill. And talk soon. All the best, man.
That's great. Thank you, John.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Connecting Seniors, a Kintsugi Heroes special series. Thank you to Colin Lilly for permission to use Broken as our theme music for this series. If you enjoyed this conversation, share the podcast with a friend and let us know by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support Kintsugi Heroes and the stories we share, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au and follow the instructions to make a tax-deductible donation. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.